Hello, I'm Mimi. I'm a digital illustrator, and today I'm going to take you on a little trip down memory lane and explore how my art style has developed over the last 2 years, from little pencil sketches to the early stages of my digital art, all the way up to where I am now as a published picture book illustrator doing digital art pretty much every day. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, but more on that later. So buckle up, because we're starting all the way back in early 2020 when I had decided that I was gonna start taking my art seriously and draw 5 times a week every single week. Apart from a handful of drawings that I had done for Inktober the year before, this is really where the current chapter of my art journey starts. I was drawing mostly in pencil in my sketchbook to begin with, and I had committed to drawing 5 days a week, whether it was big or small or good or finished or not. So drawing something with pencil on paper and taking a photo of it was quite an easy entry point, and I knew it was something I could do every day without too much hassle. I drew myself a little profile picture, and it's super simple. The head is really just a circle. I avoided drawing hands by placing my arms behind my back. The hair is really a simple shape, and there's a few plants around me for a scene. The eyes and mouth actually aren't that different to how I draw them today, except that there's no nose, and I still draw rosy cheeks, but a little bit differently. I found it really hard to come up with my own drawing ideas at this time, so I was going for a walk every morning in a local park to look for inspiration, and would spend that time actively trying to think of what I might draw when I got home. I also like doing draw this in your style challenges from other artists, because it took a lot of the decision making out of what I was going to draw, and looking back at the first one that I participated in, it's clear that my style of drawing people at that time really was a big round head and quite blobby hair. In the illustrations that followed, I leaned pretty heavily into drawing characters surrounded by plants because that was my comfort zone. But I think it's good to develop one step at a time, because each time I drew plants, I was drawing different shapes or techniques or colors, and they all play a part in developing my style. I started drawing characters interacting together or being friends, and I really liked how those illustrations felt. They had an extra friendliness about them, and that's become a real focus of my art. I think developing an art style is really just the accumulation of lots and lots and lots of little moments of going, oh, I really like how that looks or how that makes me feel, and making a mental note of that little discovery and using it again next time. And that's why it's so important to practice, because if you don't try things, you don't find happy accidents or get to explore what you do and don't like. So I kept practicing, drawing lots of plants, flowers, critters, and really simple people. I was mostly drawing simple scenes, I was working on using outlines less heavily, and I was just kind of experimenting with really leaning into the sketchy pencil texture look or a smoother look. I began experimenting with adding watercolor as a base and then drawing details with colored pencil on top. I loved how vibrant it made my illustrations look, and it allowed me to play around with new ways of coloring. I was also starting to draw more complex scenes sometimes and introduce a little more depth with foregrounds. I also introduced around this time adding sparkles and stars as elements floating around the edges of my illustrations, which is something I still do now. The hair of my characters had also started becoming way more interesting than the blobs I had started out with earlier in the year. I had been drawing every weekday for about 3 months now, and felt like I was learning a lot, and it really motivated me to keep drawing. The great thing about drawing every day is that it doesn't matter if what you drew today didn't work out the way you wanted, because you learn from those mistakes and get another chance tomorrow. I felt like I really wanted more contrast in my art, so I started bringing my art into Photoshop and going over areas that I wanted to be stronger. I was kind of tracing over my own art with digital brushes, and in a way that's partly how I learned to draw in digital software with digital brushes. Then one day I did my first fully digital illustration with digital brushes. I think it was partly because I had run out of space in my sketchbook, but it also felt like the right time because I had built up some confidence over the past few months. I felt a little clunky with it overall and really wasn't sure how to go about layering things, but I was pleased to have created something digital. From then on, I did pretty much all of my illustrations digitally. At times I felt like I was taking a step backwards with my art because I didn't know how to achieve the complexity and texture I had come to enjoy with pencils, but I knew that sometimes you have to take a small step backwards to be able to make progress in another direction, and it would just be a learning curve to overcome. I started playing with some lighting effects and digital gradients to see if I liked them, but those effects didn't really stick around, which is an example of something I tried and didn't really keep as part of my style. I was still mostly using outlines in my art, so I leaned pretty heavily into that for a few drawings to see if I wanted that to be a strong, intentional part of my style, because there are lots of artists who use outlines in their art and it looks awesome, but it just didn't feel right for me, and all of a sudden I felt like I had the confidence to move away from that and draw without outlines. Almost everything after that I drew a sketch for as outlines, and then I used that sketch as a reference to draw a color illustration without any outlines. The next challenge I faced was getting enough contrast between elements in my drawings for them to stand out from one another, because that's something that outlines really help with, and why they were handy while I was getting the hang of things, because it's just one less thing to think about. Because I was illustrating so many things, I could slowly add one challenge at a time, and every drawing was a learning opportunity. I wanted to learn slowly because it's frustrating to try and tackle every challenge all at once, and I wanted to enjoy the experience of illustrating still. So I had been playing with framing my art in different shapes for a little while, but it was around this time that I started doing that really consistently, and I liked that it made my feed look clean and cohesive. I could still draw anything I wanted, but I alternated between having my art in a square frame and having no frame. I also started drawing hands with fingers, which was a big upgrade from the noodle hands that I'd been drawing previously. Like I've been saying, it's really a case, for me at least, of tackling one step at a time, slowly introducing new challenges, slowly experimenting with what does and doesn't work for me, and practice, practice, practice. I don't think I can underestimate how important it is to practice when you're developing your skills and style. By Christmas 2020, I had done about 170 illustrations that year. That's 170 opportunities to learn something new, to try something and not like it, to accidentally stumble across something I do like, and to grow as an artist. Now this is a great time to mention the sponsor of this video, which is Skillshare. They're an online learning community with thousands of classes to explore on all sorts of creative topics, and if you're looking to develop your art style, they have lots of classes on that exact topic. I really like this class by Jenna Blackburn called Develop Your Signature Style, Overcoming Obstacles with a 5-Day Art Challenge, because she talks about doing lots of practice, being okay with making bad art, and finding time for your art, which are all things I needed to do to develop my own art style. She helps you put together a personal art challenge, which is a great idea for getting started. Skillshare is great if you're wanting to invest in your art journey and learn from other creatives, and if you'd like to give it a go, then the first 1,000 people to use the link in my description or my code MimiPenelIllustrator will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thanks so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and helping me to keep on creating. Now let's get back to the video. So by early 2021, I was framing a lot of my illustrations in little plants, which I really liked the look of, and that stuck around for quite a while. I tried drawing buildings for the first time after my nephew suggested that I draw a little village, and was surprised by how much I enjoyed drawing them. So drawing little cottages would become a staple among the subjects that I draw, and I still draw them quite often. I was also drawing lots of cats and experimenting with how to draw more dynamic hair on girl characters. I was still getting the hang of how I wanted to use color, with some of my illustrations being really bold, while some were still really soft. I started doing commissions for people and was beginning to feel a lot more confident drawing portraits, so I drew lots of human characters for a little while. I liked using soft, muted colors, and I would reuse color palettes across illustrations so that it was one less thing to think about, and it had the added bonus of making my feed look quite unified. I was pretty much alternating between drawing cats, girl characters, cute animals, flowers, and anything with a happy face on it. My scenes were sometimes becoming much more detailed because I was comfortable with digital drawing and how to layer things to add depth. My general technique is still pretty much the same now as it was then. If you'd ever like to see my full drawing process, I have quite a few of those videos on my Patreon. Now, I had been drawing 5 days a week for about a year, and I felt like I had done a huge amount of learning in that time and overcome a lot of the major hurdles to being able to illustrate the kinds of drawings I wanted to illustrate. From then on, I drew a little less frequently, more like 3 times a week, and I wanted to focus on drawing more types of animals and just illustrating things that spread joy. I wanted to try more complex scenes that were out of my comfort zone, and try using darker colors with strong shading. Dan had started animating my illustrations and we were making cute little reels, bringing my art to life, and it brought me so much joy and really motivated me to draw more cute characters and scenes. I tried bringing more depth into some of my illustrations because it was a challenge and something that I wasn't confident with. I also illustrated my first picture book around this time, and it was the first time I'd needed to make sure my characters and overall style was so consistent across a whole project, which was a little bit daunting. I then experimented with different colors for a little while, like browns and even some blues and purples, which I had very rarely used, but overall my palette was still quite muted. I was drawing fewer people and more houses and animals. It wasn't always a conscious choice to draw more or less of something, it usually just came about based on what I felt like drawing at the time. And it was probably because I had just drawn lots of people in my picture book that I wanted to draw some other things for a while. I was sometimes drawing soft textured scenes, and sometimes drawing really bold, simple pieces. My sparkles got bolder and fatter around this time, which is how I draw them now, and I definitely settled into a way of drawing leaves and plants that I liked. I found that it was often the simple, colourful drawings that I enjoyed looking at the most, so I brought back a more vibrant colour palette, and this year have mostly been drawing simple, cute illustrations. I've settled into pretty much alternating between a square frame and a circle background in my feed, and I'm mostly using a pretty similar colour palette across all of my recent illustrations. They're bringing me joy to illustrate and joy to look at, and it sounds like they make you guys happy too. So that's where my style is at the moment, but it's not where it will be forever. I don't think it's important to make sure your style is always consistent because then it wouldn't develop. And I don't think we should expect our growth to be linear either because it usually isn't. I'd love to know how you feel about your art style. Does it bring you joy to illustrate at the moment, or are you not quite where you want to be? Thanks so much for watching this video and coming along on my journey. I love sharing my art with you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!